Chapter 15: East Asia, Japan, South Korea, and Modern China in the Capability, Complexity Trap. East Asia is the most revealing contemporary test case of the capability, complexity model. Unlike ancient empires or early modern colonial states, Japan, South Korea, and modern China industrialized within a compressed historical window. Their literacy revolutions, bureaucratic expansion, technological adoption, and demographic transitions all unfolded within roughly the last 150 years. The structural forces driving both their rise and their present strain are therefore visible in real time. These societies demonstrate the same governing law: advanced systems require ever-expanding capability bases. When capability stagnates or contracts, institutional performance deteriorates. Contraction follows. The clearest illustration appears in Japan. For most of its pre-modern history, the country operated as a stable but low-complexity system, organized through a feudal hierarchy of daimyo, samurai, and peasant communities. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 transformed that structure with extraordinary speed. In this phase, the state imported Western engineering, legal frameworks, scientific education, and bureaucratic models, building meritocratic ministries, modern universities, nationwide schooling systems, and industrial firms capable of absorbing advanced technology. These reforms sharply increased capability density. The population became broadly literate and highly disciplined, administrators were technically trained, and competence rather than lineage increasingly determined advancement. Within 2 generations, the country had become East Asia's first modern great power, with its 1905 victory over Russia demonstrating that transformation decisively. However, this capability was directed toward imperial expansion rather than sustainable governance. Administering Korea, Taiwan, Manchuria, and large areas of China required more officials, engineers, and logisticians than the system could supply at consistent standards. As expansion continued, the state compensated for talent shortages by lowering thresholds, promoting ideologically aligned officers, and allowing factional rivalry to distort strategy. The system became rigid and operationally brittle. The Second World War exposed those limits. Inter-service coordination was poor, doctrine became inflexible, and operational errors compounded. At that point, the system had exceeded the capability envelope of its population, and the imperial structure collapsed under the weight of its own complexity. Post-war reconstruction followed a different path. Strong mathematics and science education, disciplined labor structures, long-term corporate planning, and coherent ministries, such as the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, allowed the system to dominate global manufacturing in automobiles, electronics, optics, and precision machinery. Few societies have aligned a high-complexity industrial system so closely with the capability required to operate it. Yet a structural constraint eventually emerged. Fertility fell to among the lowest levels in the world, the population began to shrink, retirements hollowed out the capability pipeline, and immigration remained limited for political and cultural reasons. The workforce aged faster than it could be replaced, and national capacity entered a slow erosion. The Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011 revealed how this erosion manifests within advanced technical institutions. Risk warnings regarding tsunami vulnerability were ignored, safety documentation was falsified, and emergency procedures existed largely in compliance manuals rather than in rehearsed practice. When failure occurred, decision-making paralysis and regulatory capture worsened the outcome. This was not a failure of engineering theory. It was a failure of institutional competence inside a complex system operated by aging bureaucracies with declining accountability. The lost decades reinforced the same pattern. After the asset bubble collapsed in the 1990s, banks rolled over bad debt, the state protected unproductive firms, and political incentives favored preservation over restructuring. Capability still existed, but decision systems became risk-averse and immobilized. Institutions preserved form while function decayed. South Korea followed a parallel but more compressed trajectory. After the devastation of the Korean War, the state pursued rapid industrialization under a centralized developmental regime. Heavy investment in education produced a technically capable population, while export manufacturing created dense clusters of engineering and industrial competence. The bureaucracy coordinated policy across ministries and conglomerates with high efficiency. Now the system faces the steepest demographic contraction ever recorded in a modern society. Fertility has fallen below replacement to unprecedented levels, dependency ratios are inverting, fiscal burdens are rising, and shrinking cohorts must support expanding institutional systems. The very pressures that produce success, intense academic competition, high urban costs, and delayed family formation, now undermine the capability base that sustained growth. The university funnel illustrates this distortion. Admission to the three most prestigious institutions, Seoul National University, Korea University, and Yonsei University, has become a national bottleneck. Students optimize for entrance examinations rather than broad competence, spending years mastering test formats instead of developing initiative, resilience, and applied problem solving. The system selects for credential performance under narrow metrics. Employers increasingly report misalignment. Graduates possess strong theoretical foundations yet struggle with independent execution, cross-disciplinary coordination, and practical decision-making under uncertainty. Burnout is widespread, and the credential escalator intensifies competition while compressing creativity. The outcome is predictable. The system preserves prestige signals while the underlying capability it requires begins to thin. Selection becomes more refined, but the cohort feeding the system shrinks. Complexity remains. The capability base contracts. China presents a different variant of the same trap. Its rise represents the largest capability mobilization in modern history. Mass literacy campaigns, aggressive STEM education, rural-to-urban migration, export-oriented manufacturing, and a bureaucratic apparatus capable of absorbing foreign technology at scale produced an extraordinary surge in capability density. Infrastructure, manufacturing ecosystems, and global economic influence expanded in tandem. However, the demographic window has now closed. The one-child era produced rapidly aging cohorts and a shrinking workforce. Fertility is now sharply negative, and the population has begun to decline. The same arithmetic constraint is now visible. As capability tightens, institutional burdens intensify. Urban governance grows more complex, healthcare demands expand, financial fragility deepens, regional disparities widen, and geopolitical commitments multiply. The load increases while the operating base narrows. The Evergrande collapse revealed structural fragility beneath apparent growth. Debt was obscured, local government liabilities were masked, construction outpaced organic demand, and reporting incentives favored optimism over accuracy. This is a familiar late-stage pattern: distorted information flows, fear of candid disclosure, and complexity outrunning administrative control. Migration cannot easily resolve these pressures. In early developmental phases, selective migration can increase capability density. In late phases, migration becomes volumetric and administratively expensive. Importing raw population does not replace retiring skilled cohorts. It increases system load at precisely the moment institutional capacity is tightening. Education, health, welfare, and integration demands rise. Japan and South Korea limit large-scale migration primarily for structural reasons. The constraint is administrative, not ideological. East Asia therefore offers three tightly aligned lessons. Japan demonstrates how rapid capability expansion builds advanced systems, and how demographic contraction reverses them. South Korea demonstrates how compressing industrialization into a single lifetime accelerates both ascent and strain. China demonstrates that even immense scale cannot escape demographic arithmetic or the compounding weight of complexity. Their trajectories differ in tempo and political structure. The governing law does not. As capability declines, standards soften, information quality degrades, and complexity becomes unmanageable. Contraction becomes the stable equilibrium. East Asia is not an exception to the civilizational cycle. It is its most contemporary and most observable expression.